We've been lucky enough to see some proper dream feuds and matches play out in WWE over the years, but being the perennially dissatisfied wrestling fans that we are, we can't help but ask for more and wonder, what if, can we? We want to see the biggest and best beef with one another, and in theory, WWE should want to give it to us too. Sometimes they intended to do just that, but for one reason or another, it never quite happened. On other occasions, the wrestlers themselves pushed and pushed, but met a McMahon-shaped brick wall. Oh, what could have been? I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 WWE dream feuds that almost happened. Join us. Number 10, Hulk Hogan vs. Jake Roberts. On paper, a feud between the heroic Hulk Hogan and the villainous Jake Roberts in the 80s is pure money. The Snake and the Hulkster were diametric opposites and would have made perfect foils for one another. Both had distinct characters, promo, and wrestling styles, and would no doubt have drawn big houses on the road. A feud was planned between the two, but after Roberts dropped Hogan with a DDT during an unaired Snake Pit segment, seemingly done to kick off their rivalry, it was quickly nixed. Trouble was, fans actually wanted to see Jake beat up the Golden Goose, and, well, in the days of maintaining kayfabe and perception being reality, pal, that just wasn't going to fly. They ended up working against one another on just 2 house show events, with Hulk later claiming that the pair didn't have chemistry together and that their bouts had a distinct lack of crowd heat. Had the feud been built up properly on television over times, perhaps culminating on an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, I'm sure that Roberts would have ended up turning the crowd in the right direction. Besides, I genuinely want to know whether Hogan's famous pythons are indeed more powerful than, you know, an actual one. Number 9, Shawn Michaels vs. Eddie Guerrero. Had Eddie Guerrero not tragically passed away in November 2005, we may have gotten at least one dream match between him and Shawn Michaels. A WrestleMania meeting between Latino Heat and the Heartbreak Kid had been discussed before, with Bruce Pritchard noting on his Something to Wrestle With podcast that the way it was laid out was to do with Eddie being something like the Mexican equivalent of Michaels. Both were two of the greatest wrestlers of all time, and there were certainly parallels when it came to their styles and careers. Both had also hit rock bottom in their personal lives, become born-again Christians, and returned to WWE to enhance their reputations and have a proper second act. Hypothetically, their dispute could have started, or at least been teased, during the SmackDown vs. Raw Survivor Series match that Guerrero was booked to be a part of before tragedy struck. From there, we could have easily seen further confrontation in the 2006 Royal Rumble before the build intensified on the road to WrestleMania. Let's face it, whatever story they chose to tell, it was guaranteed to deliver in the ring. Number 8, Hulk Hogan vs. Steve Austin. When Hulk Hogan returned to WWE in February 2002, ending an almost 9-year absence from the company, fans began booking dream matches between the man in red and yellow and the current crop of WWE stars like The Rock, Kurt Angle, and Triple H. We got to see the Hulkster take on all 3 of those, but the name on top of everyone's wish list was Steve Austin. A pair of industry icons and the top stars during 2 of WWE's hottest ever periods, the feud would have practically written itself. WWE wanted the match at WrestleMania 18, but Stone Cold had other ideas. He, like many others in the locker room at the time, were wary of the reputation that the NWO were bringing with them from WCW and was hesitant to get involved with a political heavyweight like Hogan. His spot ended up going to the Great One instead, while Austin had to settle for a humdrum match with Scott Hall on the grandest stage. Many years later, the Texas Rattlesnake expressed regret at not working a feud with Hulk, while Jim Ross stated that while the promos and build would have been tremendous and generated much interest, he's unsure how the two would have gelled in the ring. Like Budweiser and tanning oil, is my guess. Number 7, The Rock vs. Shawn Michaels. Dwayne Johnson is, by all accounts, an incredibly patient and ridiculously nice guy. He's also a smart businessman and worked with everyone from Al Snow and Billy Gunn to Brock Lesnar and Triple H, while riding high as the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. Yes, The Rock knew that he was going to get over and stay over no matter the caliber of his opponent or any personal animosity that might have existed between them. One person he was not prepared to do business with, however, was Shawn Michaels. Michaels. Because Shawn Michaels, in case you haven't heard, could be a bit of a dick back in the day and had tried to make life difficult for the People's Champion as he rose through the ranks. Johnson also resented HBK for making a derogatory comment towards his promoted grandmother when a young Michaels visited the territory when Rock was just a teenager. WWE would have loved to have booked the feud and eventual match from 2002 onwards when Shawn returned, but Rock was never interested, and what's more, their schedules never really did align. Number 6, Dean Ambrose vs. Mick Foley. Has any top-tier wrestling star in history been as selfless over the years as Mick Foley? It could be argued that no one else has done as much to help the careers of others, as Foley went all out to solidify Triple H as a main event player, before later on doing his darndest to get Randy Orton and Edge to the next level. Mrs. Foley's baby boy was eyeing another talent to work his magic with in 2012, when he kickstarted a would-be feud with Dean Ambrose. On the weekend of WrestleMania 28, a video of the Lunatic Fringe confronting the hardcore legend in a hotel lobby went viral, followed by a back-and-forth exchange of tweets between the two. Some of those tweets from Ambrose concerning Foley's family really did upset Saint Mick, however, who asked him to stop. When Dean didn't, Mick called the whole thing off. After Ambrose had later apologized, Foley supposedly reconsidered but failed WWE's Impact testing and was unable to be cleared to wrestle anyway. The Hall of Famer admitted that while he would have liked to have worked a feud with Ambrose, it's best that it didn't happen since his foe ended up debuting with The Shield later that year. Number 5, Eddie Guerrero vs. Steve Austin. After giving 2 middle fingers to the idea of working with Hogan, Steve Austin went on to have feuds with The Undertaker, Big Show, and Ric Flair. Big stars, yes, but they also left old Fang McFrost feeling less than inspired at a point where he was already close to burnout. So he requested to work a program with Eddie Guerrero, who had not long since returned to the company. Austin was a fan of his work, and for Latino Heat, it was finally a chance to work extensively with one of WWE's top attractions. Their feud began on an episode of Raw, with Eddie and Austin butting heads at a bar over karaoke. Seriously? The following week, the two got into it in the ring, and Eddie left him laid out with a frog splash. The week after that was supposed to see Guerrero cost Stone Cold his King of the Ring qualifier match with Brock Lesnar, but Austin famously walked out rather than go through with Creative's plans. They'd already worked a few house show main events together, but their planned encounter at the pay-per-view was scrapped, with Flair subbing in for Austin. Number 4, Bret Hart vs. Hulk Hogan. The conclusion of WrestleMania 9 left a sour taste in the mouths of everyone not named Terry Bollea, as Hulk Hogan strolled out following Bret Hart's WWE title loss to Yokozuna, pretended to be a concerned mate, and ended up leaving as champion himself without breaking so much as half a sweat. The story goes that Bret was assured that this was just a bump in the road and that he would get the belt back sooner rather than later by beating the Hulkster one-on-one. That was, apparently, supposed to go down at SummerSlam 1993. Promotional materials were shot and filmed, and WWE's magazines even hyped up the potential bout, but it never ended up happening. How a feud between the two would have played out certainly would have been interesting, as both were babyfaces at the time and had virtuous characters that believed that they were right. But Hogan didn't want to work with the excellence of execution, especially if it meant doing the honors, so plans changed, brother. Hulk instead dropped the strap to Yokozuna at the King of the Ring, worked a European tour, and then left WWE for the best part of a decade. Their sole singles match together took place 5 years later on a random episode of WCW Nitro. Number 3, Randy Savage vs. Shawn Michaels. When Randy Savage was phased out and put behind the commentator's desk in order for the new generation of WWE stars to flourish, the Macho Man did his best in that role, but deep down, he was bored. He wanted to perform in the ring and wrestle, with one talent in particular catching his attention. According to Randy's brother Lanny the Genius Poffo, Savage was angling for a long-term program with Shawn Michaels, which would have taken place in a couple of WrestleManias and seen Randy, after losing the final match, banished to the announce table for the rest of his WWE days. Logically, this would have been Manias 9 and 10, 10 since Savage worked with Flair at 8, was behind the desk for 9, and wrestled Crush at 10. Though Savage had it all mapped out and was keen to pass the torch to HBK, Vince McMahon wasn't sold on the idea at all. The failure to greenlight this feud is allegedly another grudge that Randy held against his former boss and helped fuel his decision to leave for WCW. Savage and Shawn actually did have a couple of very good matches against one another in 1992, but a proper feud would have been something else. Number 2, CM Punk versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. The beer-drinking Texas Rattlesnake versus the straight-edge Second City Saints. The blue-collar working-class hero versus the holier-than-thou ideological zealot. Steve Austin versus CM Punk. A feud between these two would have been incredible had it happened, and according to Punk himself, there was a moment in time where it looked possible, but alas, it was not to be. Punk began pushing for a match with Austin in 2011, not too long before his WWE contract was due to expire, after an off-air segment where Stone Cold gave him, The Miz and Sheamus all stunners to send the crowd home happy. Not so long after, the two were involved in a heated face-to-face segment backstage, and not too long after that, Punk wore Austin's t-shirt while delivering his famous pipe bomb promo. Regrettably, the bionic redneck's injuries have prevented him from wrestling a proper match since WrestleMania 19 in 2003. WWE, though, continued to tease us in late 2012 when Punk and Austin had a sit-down with Jim Ross to promote the WWE 2K video game. Number 1, Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair. Despite having the ability to book the biggest match ever at their biggest show of the year, WWE decided to go in another direction in 1992. I guess Vince McMahon secretly hates money or something. Ric Flair jumped from WCW to WWE in 1991 and immediately began targeting Hulk Hogan, sowing the seeds for a future blockbuster showdown on the grandest stage. They continued to kinda sorta feud with one another leading to WrestleMania 8, and the bout was even announced on television, only for Vince to do a 180 and switch it up instead. Flair ended up defending the WWE title against Randy Savage, while Hogan ended up co-main eventing with Sid. So, what gives? Why didn't we get the feud and match that we all wanted and thought for sure that we were going to get? Some point to the Hulkster balking at losing to the Nature Boy on his last night before leaving on a hiatus, while others suggest that house show matches the two had weren't all that great and didn't draw as expected, leading to McMahon getting cold feet. Flair and Hogan would go on to battle in WCW, and then WWE, and then TNA, and then on a weird tour of Australia, and will likely be bleeding all over some nursing home before long.